Well, police again in the headlines, and again it's bad news. This time over a New York City police officer mistakenly arresting a former professional tennis player right outside the U.S. Open. We're going to discuss that and a lot more with two retired members of New York's finest. Then Donald Trump keeps leading, and that's got the Republican establishment worrying. But if the GOP tries to knock the Donald down, could it backfire? And also, we continue our special report on the homeless problem in New York. We're going to talk to people who are living on the streets and also the people trying to help it. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. And this evening, we start with a mistaken arrest by the NYPD that has made national headlines. Now, former pro tennis player James Blake, he was in the city for the U.S. Open. When he left his Midtown hotel last night, a plainclothes officer confronted him. Here's how Blake described it.
He picked me up and body slammed me and put me on the ground and told me to turn over and shut my mouth and put the cuffs on me. And I told him the first words out of my mouth were, "I'm going to 100% cooperate. I don't want any incident or whatever." Just out of reaction from what I've seen in the media, I don't want any sort of miscommunication. I'll. And
you were communicating this with him as you were? Those
are the first words out of my mouth. Is I'm going to 100% cooperate. I don't know what happened, but I'm going to cooperate with you. And he put the cuffs on me. At no time did he let me know he was a police officer.
And that again from this morning on GMA. Now, Blake is mixed race, his mother white, his father black, but he says race was not a factor.
You really believe this was a case of excessive force? You're not making it about racial profiling. You just feel that it was a use of excessive force.
Yeah, and I probably wouldn't even be so clear or be so indignant about it if it wasn't so obvious.
Now, both Mayor de Blasio and Police Commissioner Bill Bratton apologized to Blake, and the officer who took him down is now on desk duty. Now, this is just obviously the latest high-profile case involving police. How cops are dealing with their communities has become a very hot-button issue, not just in New York, but across the country. So what we wanted to do was get an officer's perspective. And joining me now in studio, Tom Verney. He's a retired NYPD detective, and Darren Porcher, a retired NYPD lieutenant himself. Gentlemen, thank you very much. We're going to get
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. We're going to get to a few different situations developing, but we've seen this story play out in different ways. Thankfully, there was no fatalities in this, maybe a couple bruises, a scrape, and a bruised ego attached to it. But it does seem that if it was you and me, Tom, would we have been thrown down and cuffed? And for 10 minutes, apparently the guy says, "Just check my ID." People recognize him apparently on the street saying, "What's James Blake doing over there?" And he said, "I'm supposed to be in the U.S. Open. I'm just standing here." Right. Is it fair to say that while he says color didn't have anything to do with it, it probably had a little bit to do with it?
I don't think color had anything to do with it, to be honest. I think other than the fact that the description that was given to the officers in this case that they were working on, Mr. Blake happened to match that description. So the fact that he's a light-skinned male black and he fit the general description, and there was some early reports that were saying that there was a photo of him that matched the perpetrator to a T. The bottom line was that there was someone that positively ID'd this man. And the officers had every legal right to stop and apprehend him. That's not what the issue is here. The issue is to whether or not this one particular officer used too much force in apprehending him, and that's what's in question at this point.
I guess my question is, let's say they said 5'10" white guy, fit in the description of receding hairline of the whole bit here, okay? Would I have been cuffed or would I have been asked, "Let me see your ID, let me see whatever else"? They knew who they were looking for, pat me down or whatever else. Would I have been cuffed, not had a conversation with, wait 10 minutes until somebody else comes on the scene? I'm just trying to get the idea. Obviously, justice isn't completely blind. No one's naive here. But what people are trying to figure out today, Darren, is how blind is it?
Well, it can be subjective, because oftentimes when we look to the African American, or we should say communities of color, they believe that there are two systems of justice that are in play, and oftentimes the communities of color receive a miscarriage in justice. So that may accent to what you're mentioning in terms of if this was a Caucasian as opposed to an African American. I just don't think that we have enough information here in this particular instance to determine if this was racially motivated or not. As Mr. Blake mentioned, he stated that he didn't believe that this was something that had a racial motivation. But as Tom stated earlier, it's more so a tactical issue as to how the officer engaged in this arrest-related instance, as opposed to could he possibly have stopped him.
Okay, and Tom, it's real easy for me in a climate-controlled studio, right, to say, why'd you throw the guy to the pavement here? And why is the guy sitting there for 10 minutes before you even ask him a question?
Right.
But what should the expectation of the public be for when same exact situations as we laid out? Let's say the cop didn't see black, white, or anything over there. He said, I got somebody that fits the description. What should he have done different? Because obviously, police plazas put him on desk duty right now, so they have to think something didn't go right. What should he have done differently than he did?
Well, I mean, the police commissioner himself came out and said that he reviewed the video. I mean, this is under investigation by Internal Affairs.
Yep.
They're going to do their investigation. The police commissioner felt, in his opinion, that he may have used too much force. And really, when it comes down to it, is the police commissioner's opinion is what really counts. So, if it is found, based on Internal Affairs investigation and based on the training and based on patrol guide procedures, that he did use too much force in this case, then he's going to be disciplined accordingly. I don't know how much time he has on. If he's still a rookie, he could be potentially fired. But he could definitely be disciplined for using too much force if that was the case. Yeah, I mean, in an ideal situation, if we were approaching someone and we were going to arrest them, we might approach them from different angles. Have a good tactical position on the guy. If in the case of Mr. Blake, where he was saying that he was completely compliant, which is an ideal situation, most people are not compliant because nobody wants to be put in handcuffs and arrested. And once the person it's been deemed that they're not the person that they're looking for, and they're going to release them as they did in this case. So to have them detained for a certain period of time is not unusual. Someone identifying someone as a wanted perpetrator, and then the cops going and apprehending them, and the person being the wrong guy, that happens all the time. So it's just a matter of how the cops actually make that interaction take place. In this case, the allegation
I guess
is
the
that
big question was, imagine the three of us in our own hometowns, right? And right on Broad Street, you're cuffed and stuffed, sitting there right on the sidewalk as all your neighbors go by, maybe your employers go by, whatever else, and you don't think that anyone's even listening to you. That's it. And there's an assumption, of guilt before innocence in this. And I know this is not a court of law. This is real time playing out. And that's what I think struck people. I want to get to a couple other flashpoints and get your takes on it. Let's go to South Carolina, where police officer Michael Slager, he's sitting in jail right now and he's facing murder charges. You probably remember this case. He shot an unarmed man named Walter Scott while he was running away. Cell phone video caught the whole thing. And it also poked holes in Slager's original story that he filed. Looked like there was a throwaway. We remember this whole incident play out. To me, 90-some-odd% of cops are good cops. It seemed that South Carolina, once they saw this video, they acted quickly on this. But how often is it, and this was the question that came up, if there wasn't video, the cops' account of this probably would have carried the day, and this guy would have been called, a lunatic drug addict who tried to, shiv the cop or shoot the cop or whatever else if they didn't catch the video that was at the ground. So the question I have is, what should the public, and I'll start with you, Darren's, perception be? What is the reality out there? How many of the cops are good cops, and how many of them are like this guy? And does the blue wall of silence sometimes protect too many of them that harms the whole shield as a consequence?
Well, I'll tell you, in my experience in the NYPD, I was a lieutenant in the Internal Affairs Bureau for a number of years, and I investigated police misconduct. This would have been a very difficult case when we look at the Walter Scott case for me to make an assessment had I not had that video to determine that this officer should have been arrested. Because generally when we think about arresting an officer, it's based on probable cause. The public, I can understand the amplification of seeing a video showing an officer shooting, in essence, executing an unarmed African-American male on live television. I could see the public saying, hey, look, you know what?
Broad daylight, it didn't seem like he was even making great efforts to cover it up, during the commission of it. But, it just begged the whole question.
It goes back to that miscarriage of justice that's perceived by the African-American community. And believe it or not, these instances of police misconduct are on the decline. However, with the magnification of video, it tends to highlight or spotlight these incidents more and more because we see it every week. We did a special on this here on your show a couple of weeks ago. And once again, it's the magnitude of seeing a video is something that amps up the African American community.
You get the point, though. You know that people are saying, this video didn't come out. This guy didn't get this on the cell phone.
Yeah.
We never would have heard about this guy. The cop would have been, and then people said, well, time out. If they looked at the autopsy, as we did later on, he was shot in the back, and you could tell he was running, and he was from a pretty decent-sized distance. The cop's life was not put in danger. Now, the cop's arguing this. He'll have his day in court and everything else. But it led people to say, how much more often does this stuff go on than we don't know about?
Yeah. I mean, the public perception is 9/10 of the law these days. And, the reality is, at least on behalf of the NYPD, I believe the statistic is still less than 1/2% of officers are actually found of doing some sort of illegal or wrongdoing in the department and subsequently either fired and or arrested because of that. So when you take 35,000 officers in the NYPD, that's an extremely small percentage. In any industry, probably could not match that.
We get the perception again. That's right, but when people file complaints with the CCRB or whatever else, how many of those actually move forward? We got a lot of attention through chokeholds, et cetera.
Yeah.
It seems like the burden is so heavy on someone to actually prove something if there isn't video,
You're
right?
absolutely right. The average case that comes into an internal investigations component comes up as unsubstantiated, meaning they're unable to prove or disprove the allegation. That's what the average citizen deals with when we have an allegation of misconduct. So you have many people that sit back and say, hey, look, my case was unsubstantiated. I know that this cop hit me. I know that this cop did something bad to me. As Tom hit it right on the head, the public's perception is paramount here, but at the same token, when we have video and when we look at the wave of innovation in technology.
By the way, do you guys want body cams?
I'm a proponent of it. I'm a strong proponent
too?
of it.
Yeah.
Have you ever felt that way? Did you come around to it after a while to say, you know what, I'm better off there being videos, so...
The only reservation I have about body cams, and this, ironically, I believe the ACLU actually came out almost in defense of the police at one point, in that, if he and I are working in a car together at night, we can't speak freely about what we did over our weekend because a lot of personal conversation that we normally have for 8 or 10 hours a day, because now it's all recorded on body cam and it may be embarrassing or whatever, the situation might be. But as far as, us taking action in the street or the cops taking action in the street, I think it's actually going to do a lot less harm than they think it is, because it's going to, help exonerate a lot of fake or false complaints that are made against police officers and show that by and large the majority are acting professionally and doing the job correctly.
Now, there's two sides to the climate argument. There's obviously the increasing level of distrust right now, especially in communities of color. But on the flip side, police believe they're under siege. Now, the New York Police Commissioner, who's the same one who, by the way, pulled that cop and put him on desk duty in the James Blake situation, Bill Bratton also said that he's concerned about what's going on as it relates to police officers, and he said the following. You'd almost have to go back, I think, to the late 60s, early 70s to see a time when there was so much anti-police sentiment in the country. Now, to my end, we see the crime numbers and everything else. How much of that is a reflection for cops to say, you know what, I'm not going to go on this call where I would have in the before because, I'm asking for trouble here, going into a certain place, something could be misconstrued or whatever. What's the reality, do you believe, in crime as it relates to police after what we saw in Texas, we've seen in other places, they've been targeted, and at the same end saying, we're not gonna, write up as many summons as we did before because there's a downside attached to it.
You have a large component of officers that have that perception of the public being against them. But unfortunately, as we move forward in society, this is the wave of the future. Citizens will have more access to, transparency to what officers are doing in the street when we look at things like body cameras, etc. So when we look at the new wave of officers that are coming into policing, they're going to see this as the wave of policing moving forward. So it's just something that they have to accept.
Okay,
whether they like it or
he's
not.
right, though. Translation, I know the precinct commanders aren't giving quotas like they used to maybe, whether they said or they didn't for stop and frisk or whatever. Are they not going into Bed-Stuy as much, doing as much community policing because, the chances of something going on in there, somebody taking a shot at them, somebody writing them up for a complaint, is the reality that there's been a slowdown?
Well, you see what happens in Baltimore. Baltimore is experiencing an unbelievable spike in murders this year because I think, to some extent,
Walter Scott's case, yeah.
Well, no, in Baltimore with the whole Freddie Gray
case,
is that there are some police that are going to be apprehensive to take action. I just did a training yesterday at the Nassau County Police Academy, and I said the same exact thing to them. I said, you know, you are coming into policing at probably the hardest time ever in probably in the history of policing. Not so much when we came into the police department, there were 2,300 murders a year in New York City. It was very dangerous in that respect. But in this respect now, where police are being second, third, and fourth guessed at every single turn by people who have no police experience whatsoever and no training whatsoever in law enforcement, but yet, again, it comes back to that public perception as to what people think the police can and cannot do, the cops questioning as to what they can and cannot do, and that momentary hesitation could potentially be deadly for a police officer. They can't hesitate for a split second to make a decision, but yet some of them are. Some of them may be backing off on getting involved in certain things because they may feel, you know, I might do the right thing every day of the week and I'm still going to get hung for it.
But do you think, though, that the problem is that it's in these 50-50 situations where the cop should or shouldn't pull a gun? Is it really that, or is it more cops tuning up a guy because he ran his mouth off? And they should know in today's age, they shouldn't do it to begin with, but they should know in today's age, somebody's got a cell phone camera. He's got a body camera. I mean, the amount of times the guy's got the body cameras on and they still do it and then file a false report.
Yeah.
Well, I guess my point is it the numbskulls in the department that are giving you guys a bigger black eye than those 50-50 judgment calls that at 3 in the morning, you don't know if the guy's going to the glove compartment for a gun or something else? I get it. Which one is it, you think?
Well, as Tom pointed out, the average officer, you have a very minute component of the police population that commits to police misconduct. However, when we think about these body cameras, granted, there's an awareness. I believe that it's going to make officers a better person in conducting police operations moving forward. Do you have these numbskulls that give the police departments a black eye? Absolutely. However, as we progress as a society, we get better in training, or I should say professional development, increases or lessens the chances of these types of instances from occurring in the future.
There's actually a company called Blue Courage, and it's for law enforcement that are watching. If you go to bluecourage.com, they actually specialize in training like that. They try to take officers away from this warrior mentality and place them back into what should be a guardian mentality. Because police are the guardians of our society. That's what they get paid for, right? So, and I think a lot of cops are, you know, for years and years and years, the focus is always on, you know, it's terrorism training, it's, you know, firearms training and tactical training, all of this stuff to arm them up to be warriors. When in today's society, more than ever, they don't necessarily need to be warriors. They're fully armed and ready to go. They need a little bit more of the guardian mentality where they're actually going out and bringing them back to what the core of policing really is. And that's what Blue Courage is actually doing.
Real quick, I know I'm heavy, Larry. Tom and Darren, you guys are 21 years old again. Would you still want to go into the academy?
Absolutely.
I don't have any regrets of what I did. I would do it all over again if I had to. It certainly is much harder now. But even when I went into the academy in 1992, it was a very different job then than when my uncles and cousins were on before.
You got a son, 21, right? He's got options. He can go do different things in the workplace. You want him to be a cop too?
Absolutely. I think that overall, it's a good line. It's an honorable profession. It has been, it is, and it'll continue in the future as being a good profession to be a part of.
Yeah, again, if cops, if they just go about their careers based on the way that they were trained, and hopefully we're all assuming that they're good people at heart that want to go out and do right for king and country, then they can get through 20 or 22 years like we did and come out and be sitting here talking to you and having a nice conversation about it. Yeah, it's still a great profession. I would still advocate for people to do it if they feel that that's what their calling is.
Well, gentlemen, I appreciate We're going to have more talks, the three of us, on this. I appreciate the time, though, very much. All right, folks, we're going to switch gears here. Now, first it was Megyn Kelly. Now Donald Trump, he's taking on Carly Fiorina. And once again, he's been accused of sexism. GOP's getting fed up, and there's rumblings Republicans want to take Trump out. But how come his poll numbers keep going up? We'll talk about that and more after this.